but I do want to move back to this morning's Torah reading for a couple minutes, or this morning's Parsha, the themes of this morning's Parsha, for a couple more minutes together. As I alluded to earlier, this morning's Parsha is very much a portion of transitions. Certainly, we as readers and weekly followers of our Torah cycle can feel those transitions coming. If we had been lucky enough to be reading from the scroll this morning, to all be in this room together, we would have lifted it up for the Chazak, Chazak, V'ni Chazek, and we would have seen that 3-inch gap that exists in the text between the book of Genesis and the book of Exodus. We would really kind of be able to see that transition. I do believe that the characters in the narrative experience this transition as well. I think they know what's going on. And there's certainly a symmetry to this story that makes it feel nicely wrapped up. After all, Jacob lives a full 17 years in Egypt, reunited with his favorite son for exactly as long as they were together when Joseph was a boy, before he was sold off to Egypt by his brothers. Yet there's also a lot of tension that exists in the heart of this Parsha. And it's also one that has everything to do with transitions. As Jacob and Joseph transition into death, there is a profound unease. Each of them, despite long and presumably fulfilling lives, don't end their lives restfully. Rather, if anything, they ask not to be laid to rest. Each of them wants his body brought up to the land of Israel to be buried. And I think that sense of unease is pervasive in the narrative as well. Perhaps Joseph and Jacob don't know what comes next, but again, as readers, we certainly do. The enslavement and the brutality under a different Pharaoh, who we will read next week, did not know Joseph. That leaves us similar to the audience watching a horror movie, yelling at the screen. Don't stay in Egypt. Don't come back after burying Jacob. Look out. But of course, all of this is to no avail. The story never changes. Every year, Jacob and Joseph die in Egypt, and every year, that new Pharaoh rises to power who did not know Joseph. This process of transition to slavery, and maybe some of the fault, perhaps lies at Jacob's feet. He went down to Egypt as an old man to see his son one more time. And instead, it turns out that he's got a lot more vigor than we initially give him credit for. The word Veyechi, the name of this week's Parsha, means that he lived. Jacob lived his remaining 17 years fully, making up for lost time with his beloved son, not taking the opportunity he otherwise might have had to head back to the Holy Land and reestablish his growing people there. There's a great irony then to be found in Jacob convening his children at the end of his life. As we read in our opening verse this morning, chapter 49, verse 1, "Come together that I might tell you what is to befall you in the days to come." That seems to be the one thing that's really distinctly missing from Jacob's words from his sons. We get no foreshadowing of what is coming immediately to them and to their progeny in the days to come. Aviva Zornberg chalks this up to an interpretive midrash that says that at the moment Jacob was about to begin telling his sons their immediate future, his connection with the divine evaporated. Or as Zornberg puts it, Jacob drew a blank. Having lived the fullness of his life out in Egypt, at the climactic moment of transition, he suffers a profound blockage. Jacob describes his own life to Pharaoh by saying, "Few and hard have been the years of my life," a statement in his 13th decade of life that should probably strike us as untrue. Certainly, he's faced his fair share of difficulties, but his family, his relationship with God, all his long years, certainly there has been much joy and lots to celebrate. I would posit, however, that perhaps Jacob suffers from living a little bit too much in the moment and in the past. Jacob is scarred by his decades living with Lavan. He dwells on the loss of his favorite wife and his favored son. And when finally reunited with Joseph, he completely forgets how to plan for and move into the future. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, writing about this week's Parsha as a transitional moment, says that our Parsha, which closes the book of Genesis, reveals that in a covenantal life, every moment is multidimensional. One lives in the moment, but the future is part of the present and affects it. I expect that this multidimensional living, as Rabbi Greenberg puts it, and our own embodiment of that experience will be one of our primary challenges to rise to in the year that has just begun. To continue living in the present moment, one where we must balance the pain and suffering still so present in our world with the joy and satisfaction we strive to find in our own daily lives, is going to be difficult. To say nothing of also holding out our hope for the light at the end of this particular tunnel that we're in with the COVID-19 crisis. And remembering not to just hold that hope as some sort of a magic light switch that one day will get to flip and things will go back to normal, but remembering that we have a say in building what comes at the end of this particular tunnel, for ourselves and for our communities. Sometimes you get to that big moment, you get to the end, that precipice of the future, and like Jacob, you draw a blank. You haven't quite done the work to plan that future, and when you finally get to move into it, you realize that, as Barry put it, you're having a massive senior moment at this really crucial moment of rebuilding. I hope that over the course of the next couple months and over the course of the next year, despite the fact that we don't know exactly what our timeline is or what we're planning for, I hope we can work together to make sure we are fully prepared for whatever it is we're going to face, and whatever our own process of rebuilding and being able to move forward is going to look like for ourselves and for our community. As we look forward to a year that will bring with it, God willing, change and blessing and growth and health and happiness and really a rebuilding of the in-person communal structures, which we've been missing so much. And I hope that by taking a really active role in planning that and hoping that and building that together, that we can rise to those moments as they come and not react as Jacob might have in drawing a blank and